Professor Wergeles here. We are on lecture number 10, accessing form data. We just got done with the document object model, the DOM slides. We're going to now look at the code. So we're going to download accessing form data before class zip, store it in a directory that you're going to remember. So we're in a new lecture. We're in lecture number 10, accessing form data, store the code right there. Make sure you unzip it. And then we're going to open that up in brackets. Now make sure all the previous files are saved. So do a save all, and then we're gonna open up the new folder. Okay, I'm on lecture number 10. We're gonna be accessing form data using JavaScript, and we're gonna take a look at file number 1. Open up number 1, forms.html, and let's see what we have. So make sure you do the live preview, and you'll see that open up in the browser right next to your editor. Now, this is the form that we looked at before. We had our username and password field. We had radio buttons. We had checkboxes. We learned how to make the checkboxes all on top of each other to make them look nice and neat. Instead of adding them behind, we add them before. We looked at the multiple selection and the buttons, comments, and a lot of other elements. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to use JavaScript to access these elements, grab the values, change the values, and modify these elements using the DOM. So let's take a look at the first example, number 2, text.html. Here's all the elements we're going to be looking at because that's the form we created before. So let's first look at text.html, which is the default input element. So here you're going to see a form. Form has the action and the method. In this case, we're not sending to any PHP file, even though we're going to be doing that here soon. I have an input type of text, which is the username. I also have an input type of password, which is going to be the user's password. Now, let's say I want to use JavaScript to get the username after they click on the button. So over here, you'll see I have 3 buttons. Okay, I have the username, password, get username, set username, and check password. We're going to be writing these functions and actually change these form input elements using the DOM. So we're going to change these elements using the DOM. So first, I need to write some JavaScript. How do I do that? I put a script tag either in the bottom of the body or in the head section. In this case, I'm going to be having buttons that are clicked. They're going to be calling these JavaScript functions. So in this case, I can actually put them in the head, and it doesn't make a difference because I have my event listener, and they're going to wait to run until that button is clicked, which will ensure the DOM has finished loading. Now, let's say I want to write a function declaration. Remember the difference between function declaration and function expression. A function declaration has a name. Let's call it get username. And this function will have no parameters. And here's the start of the block of code. So here's my first function. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to move this script down a little bit so we can just focus on the JavaScript. Okay, so I have a script tag. It's in the head section. I have a function declaration. It's called get username. Now, what do I want to do? I want to get this username value from the input type text. So I want to get it from the text field. How do I do that? Well, let's scroll down and look at that input. The input actually has an ID. Now, ID is the easiest and most common way to grab a single element. So let's use the ID. So in my JavaScript, I'm going to use the DOM. I'm going to create a variable called text object. I'm going to reference the DOM by calling the document keyword. Document should be spelled with a lowercase d. And once I do the dot notation, brackets is going to ask you what's some common methods that I can call. Well, we want to call get element by ID. As soon as I type get, I can hit enter because get element by ID is the most common method used. And I'm going to be looking for the ID down below. So this is an input type with ID equal to user. So let's look for the user ID. And we're going to do a semicolon here. Next, we're going to print this object out. So let's say I do a console.dir for a directory. We're going to print out the entire directory structure or the entire object for the text object variable. Now let's see what happens. I'm going to refresh the page. I'm going to type something here so we can see it. I'm going to click on the get username. Okay, I'm clicking on the get username. Nothing is happening. Remember, The console is in the developer tool. So if I right click, do an inspect, you'll see elements, which is going to be a visual representation of the DOM. So if I scroll down here, you'll see here it has a data brackets ID in the head. Well, I don't have that in the head. So that's different than my source code, which we talked about in the slides. So we know this is a visual representation of the DOM. And the console is in this tab here, the consoles tab. But you'll see nothing has been printed out. Why? I'm clicking the button's calling this function, right? Check that out, see what's going on, why is it not printing, and we'll see it in the next video.